You're asking me to not sue drug companies,
No,
and I'm not going to agree to that,
drug
Senator.
companies as much as you want.
All the members of this panel are accepting, including yourself, are accepting millions of dollars from the pharmaceutical industry.
Oh, no,
and protecting their interests.
Corporate
Bernie, you were the single largest acceptor of pharmaceutical dollars.
In today's video, Donald Trump's cabinet picks RFK, Tulsi Gabbard, and Kash Patel dominate their Senate hearings as Democrats continue to embarrass themselves in an attempt to try and pose a unpopular and ridiculous Trump resistance. Each one of these cabinet picks has a mic drop moment where they absolutely destroy a senator, but my personal favorite one is from RFK when he exposes Bernie Sanders to his face. As always, like the video and subscribe to the channel, but first I have to say thank you guys so much for getting me to 100,000 subscribers. I've been under the weather the past couple of days, so I didn't get a chance to make a video when it happened, but I just wanted to give everybody my deepest appreciations for helping me reach this milestone. I'm having a lot of fun making this content for you guys, so I hope you continue to enjoy it, stay subscribed, and enjoy the ride that we're going to be on for the rest of this year and going forward. But before we get into the hearings, I do want to play a clip from President Trump talking about the devastating and tragic airplane crash that happened last night in Washington, D.C. Watch.
The FAA's diversity push includes focus on hiring people with severe intellectual and psychiatric disabilities. That is amazing. And then it says FAA says people with severe disabilities are most underrepresented segment of the workforce, and they want them in, and they want them. They can be air traffic controllers. I don't think so. This was in January 14th, so that was a week before I entered office. They put a big push to put diversity into the FAA's program. The FAA is actively recruiting workers who suffer severe intellectual disabilities, psychiatric problems, and other mental and physical conditions under a diversity and inclusion hiring initiative spelled out on the agency's website. Can you imagine? Targeted disabilities are those disabilities that the federal government, as a matter of policy, has identified for special emphasis in recruitment and hiring. The FAA's website states they include hearing, vision, missing extremities, partial paralysis, complete paralysis, epilepsy, severe intellectual disability, psychiatric disability, and dwarfism all qualify.
My heart breaks for all the families affected by this tragedy. I fly all the time, and this was just a surreal wake-up call that life is short, life is finite. Hold the people close to you that you love, tell them you love them, and never take a day for granted because crazy things can happen. As far as we can tell, this was a freak accident and not clear if it was a case of negligence by the helicopter pilot or by anybody at air traffic control. But the diversity-centered policies that Trump exposed the FAA to be pursuing are part of the reason why Americans are having such a fierce rejection of DEI policies. Not just because they're racist and discriminatory, but because they're inherently dangerous. Again, I'm not saying that this crash was a result of DEI, but putting a focus on hiring people based on circumstances, criteria, or qualifications that don't have anything to do with the job success shows a complete lack of focus, seriousness, and priorities. I actually read and shared a copy of this FAA memo. Make sure you guys follow me on X if you haven't already. Demanded that 3% of new hires be candidates from those groups that Donald Trump mentioned in order to achieve their diversity agenda. Here is a video put out by the FAA literally saying, apply if you're Black, Hispanic, or Native American, and we will hire you because of that.
Hi, I'm Brad Mims, Deputy Administrator at the Federal Aviation Administration. We are looking for the best and brightest to join us as air traffic controllers. We need a diverse group of air traffic controllers to bring distinct perspectives to handle the ever-changing aerospace landscape. I'm calling on students and alumni from HBCUs, Hispanic serving institutions, and tribal colleges to apply now to become air traffic controllers. I don't want anyone interested to miss out on this amazing career opportunity. Make sure you complete your full application during our application window. The short application window ends on May 8th. We need a diverse, next-generation air traffic workforce with people from all backgrounds. So apply now.
These policies aren't just racist, but they're cruel, and liberals never consider this part. They are robbing the people from these groups of the feeling of achievement, of the feeling of self-worth, that the only reason they've been accepted or given preference is because of a characteristic that is outside of their control and irrelevant to the job. You're telling them they can't compete with their white counterpart and that they need the government to step in and afford them any chance at success, despite the hard work that they put in themselves. But I just wanted to touch on it briefly because it is tragic news and it just exposes how deep this DEI agenda was ingrained throughout corporate America and the government. Now let's move on to these confirmation hearings. The first one that I'm going to show you is RFK Jr. battling it out with Elizabeth Warren, who gets furious when RFK will not commit to not suing pharmaceutical companies.
Mr. Kennedy, it's just a really simple question.
Yeah,
You've taken in $2.5 million. I want to know if you will commit right now that not only will you not go to work for drug companies, you won't go to work suing the drug companies and taking your rake out of that while you're a secretary and for 4 years after. It's just...
I'll commit to not taking any fees from drug companies while I'm secretary.
No. I'm asking about fees from suing drug companies. Will you agree not to do that?
You're asking me to not sue drug companies,
No,
and I'm not going to agree to that,
drug
Senator.
companies as much as you want.
I'm not going to agree to not sue drug companies or anybody.
So Kennedy can kill off access to vaccines and make millions of dollars while he does it. Kids might die, but Robert Kennedy can keep cashing in.
All RFK's been saying is he wants pharmaceutical companies to follow accurate and clear science and actually be held accountable that they are creating medicine and products that are safe and effective for the American public. And Elizabeth Warren is fighting back, trying to prohibit any kind of scrutiny from being placed upon these pharmaceutical companies. RFK has never stated that vaccines are bad or that drugs are bad. He's simply pointing out that the increased number of vaccinations that are being required and the increased amount of drugs that are being prescribed to patients has a direct correlation with the increased mental health problem in this country, with child obesity, with child development issues, and that there needs to be clear, objective science that studies these correlations and rules out if vaccines or the food or the prescription medicine could be linked to these devastating increases that are hurting the health of Americans. We shouldn't have a healthcare system that is just declared obeisance to the pharmaceutical industry in perpetuity. Now, this is my favorite moment of all the hearings right here, where Robert Kennedy spars off with Bernie Sanders and exposes him to his face for accepting more money from Big Pharma than anybody else.
So let me ask Mr. Kennedy again. If we want to make America healthy, will you assure the American people that you will fight to do what every other major country on earth does, guarantee health care to every single American?
I'm going to make America healthier than other countries in the world right now.
Will you guarantee do what every other major country does? That's a simple question.
And by the way, Bernie, the problem of corruption is not just in the federal agencies, it's in Congress too. Almost all the members of this panel are accepting, including yourself, are accepting millions of dollars from the pharmaceutical industry.
Oh, no,
and protecting their interests.
Oh, I thought that would come. No. I ran for president like you. I got millions and millions of contributions They did not come from the executives, not one nickel of PAC money from the pharmaceutical industry. They came from workers.
In 2020, you were the single largest
Because I had
receiver of
small
pharmaceutical money.
contributions from workers all over this country. Workers,
You were the
not a nickel from corporate
Bernie,
PACs.
you were the single largest acceptor of pharmaceutical dollars.
No, from workers in the industry.
1.5 million.
Yeah, out of 200 million. All right, but you have not answered, last question. You have not answered my question.
Mr. Chairman, we're 3 minutes
Ask you a question.
How do we make America healthy if you don't guarantee health
Chairman,
care
we're
to all
literally
people?
3 minutes over.
Bernie Sanders questioning anybody is always such a disingenuous moment because he's a full-blown communist, and his questioning always has to do with, I'm a socialist. I believe in socialist principles. You are the opposite of a socialist. Now, do you promise to work with me in pushing forth a socialist agenda? And then when they obviously disagree with him, he goes into full-blown rage mode about how they're so bad and working against the interests of the American people. I remember after Trump was inaugurated, he put out a video trying to demonize Trump because he didn't talk about the income inequality, the free health care as a human right, the housing as a human right. When Trump didn't run on that, say he was running on that, or said that that was part of his platform or agenda. Anybody who isn't a socialist is bad to Bernie Sanders. But that's when RFK exposed him for taking more big pharma money than anybody else. And Bernie just squirmed, trying to lie through his teeth, but absolutely couldn't. RFK would not let him off the hook. I bet Big Pharma would love Bernie's idea of nationalized healthcare, because then their only customer that they sold to would be the United States government and all their infinite money. The next person I'm going to show you is Kash Patel, who is Donald Trump's pick for FBI director. Now, he got questioned by another bad faith Democrat and absolutely laid into them. Watch.
He said that the FBI headquarters, where they investigate cybercrime and terrorism, should be shut down and open as a deep state, as a museum. Did he say that the headquarters should be shut down?
Mr. Chair.
I deserve an answer to that question. He is asking to be head of the FBI, and he said that their headquarters should be shut down.
Mr. Chair, parliamentary inquiry.
You got anything you want to say, Mr. Patel, before I go on to Senator Lee?
Simply this. If the best attacks on me are going to be false accusations and grotesque mischaracterizations, the only thing this body is doing is defeating the credibility of the men and women at the FBI. I stood with them here in this country. In every theater of war we have, I was on the ground in service of this nation. And any accusations leveled against me that I would somehow put political bias before the Constitution are grotesquely unfair. And I will have you reminded that I have been endorsed by over 300,000 law enforcement officers to become the next director of the FBI. Let's ask them.
Now, the real reason why the Democrat Party is so afraid of Kash Patel is because he was instrumental in uncovering and exposing the weaponization of the CIA, the FBI, and the Department of Justice against Donald Trump. And now there's somebody in charge who's going to proactively clean out this kind of political corruption. And that's why all of the Democrat senators in all of these hearings are so disingenuous and embarrassing, is because they're not trying to be good faith. They're just trying to create a spectacle and create a circus. None of them would vote for Trump's appointees, even if they answered all the questions that they wanted them to. Their only goal is to get these people in a gotcha moment or try to drive a wedge between them and Donald Trump. The Democrats find it offensive that Donald Trump is putting people in place who aren't going to undermine him at every turn and are actually going to help implement his agenda. They're so scared of this second Trump presidency because he's much more competent in the workings of the federal government and is picking better people to man his key positions. They expect him to appoint people who are going to obstruct his every move. And you know they're going to keep losing elections because they still don't get it. They still have such a huge misunderstanding of what the mandate of the American people was. The American people want government to have a deep cleanse, to be restructured, reorganized, rid of all the corruption, shaken down to its core. And Democrats are like, oh my gosh, look at all this stuff going on. It's so much. This isn't what the American people voted for. when it's explicitly what we voted for. We were tired of having a government that does not work for us, that is inefficient, that is ineffective, that goes $2 trillion in debt every single year, giving out money to every single country for every single cause. Now, this is when things get spicy as Ted Cruz and Kash Patel expose Nancy Pelosi for being complicit in January 6th by denying 20,000 National Guard troops. Watch.
What were you doing on that day?
On that day specifically, responding to preparing to mobilize and deploy the National Guard once we got the lawful request from the local governing authority, which was the mayor of D.C. and the Speaker of the House.
Now, how many days in advance were you working to prepare the Department of Defense to help secure the Capitol on January 6th?
Days in advance, Senator. We were in the Oval Office on an unrelated national security matter with the President of the United States, the Secretary of Defense, the Chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, and myself. And the President authorized up to 20,000 plus National Guardsmen and women to secure any security measures necessary related to the Capitol. So we were moving to the fullest extent of the law before the requisite request came from a local governing authority days ahead of time.
And while you were Chief of Staff at DOD, how many times did DOD approach Capitol Police and ask if they needed National Guard assistance?
I believe those letters are well documented, numerous instances, and in numerous of those instances, those requests were shut down.
Now, am I correct that the Capitol Sergeant at Arms said assistance was unnecessary?
That's correct, Senator.
Now, you can call me a conspiracy theorist if you want, but January 6th was not an insurrection led by Donald Trump. Let's just start with the point they talked about. Why did Donald Trump offer 20,000 National Guard troops if his plan for that day was to overthrow the U.S. government? He did everything in his power to try to bolster the police presence and keep things as safe as possible, and Democrats rejected it. Number two, Democrats consider all of us Trump supporters to be some gun nut cultists. Well, for the most armed nation in the world, planning to overthrow the U.S. government, isn't it a little surprising how nobody there was armed? How no guns were used in this apparent insurrection? Someone else point to me an insurrection in history where they overthrew the government where guns or military force was not used. Number three, the Democrats love to say Trump is responsible because he said, make sure you fight like hell. So now all of a sudden, we're just going to act like we're not real people, and the term fight is commonly used, especially with politicians, as an expression. I'm not even going to play the countless clips of Kamala Harris on the campaign trail saying you need to fight, fight, fight for your country. Joe Biden said it. Obama has said it. Everybody says it because we understand as English speakers that it's an expression of speech that means just work really hard and try really hard for something. So they want to take him literally there when he said you have to fight like hell, but they refused to take him literally when he said protest peacefully and patriotically. So what more could he have done to say don't be violent than to say protest peacefully? And finally, they always try to say, oh, well, he let it go on for too long. He didn't tell them to stop. What is Donald Trump supposed to do in that situation? Do they think Donald Trump would have sent a tweet out and all of those people would have just halted and stopped and walked home? What can one man do to stop a riot from occurring? Besides, oh yeah, offer 20,000 National Guard troops. And then when you mix in what was exposed earlier this year, that some 27 FBI informants were on the ground during the Capitol riots, the whole thing starts to get a little bit murky. Now let's get into Tulsi Gabbard, who drops a bombshell exposing the politically motivated weaponization that happened under the Democrats.
Here are just a few other examples. The American people elected Donald Trump as their president not once but twice, and yet the FBI and intelligence agencies were politicized by his opponents to undermine his presidency and falsely portray him as a puppet of Putin. Title I of FISA was used illegally to obtain a warrant to spy on Trump campaign advisor Carter Page, using a Clinton campaign-funded false dossier as their so-called evidence. Biden campaign advisor Tony Blinken was the impetus for the 51 former senior intelligence officials' letter dismissing Hunter Biden's laptop as disinformation specifically to help Biden win the election. Former DNI James Clapper lied to this committee in 2013, denying the existence of programs that facilitated the mass collection of millions of Americans' phone and internet records, yet was never held accountable. Under John Brennan's leadership, the CIA abused its power to spy on Congress, to dodge oversight, lied about doing it until he was caught, and yet has never been held responsible. Under Biden, the FBI abused its power for political reasons to try to surveil Catholics who attend traditional Latin Mass, labeling them as quote-unquote radical traditionalist Catholics.
Again, they fear Trump's appointees so much because they are coming in to clean up this mess. And because the Democrats are the culprits who initiated this kind of behavior, it's going to be tons of Democrats who are on the chopping block. So every Democrat is now trying to save their own skin. You should be very skeptical against people who are against cleaning up corruption. It typically means that they're the ones involved in it. And that's why the Democrat Party's approval rating just hit a historic low, while the GOP approval rating hit a historic high. That's why a majority of Americans are excited and optimistic about Trump's presidency. People appreciate that Trump's appointees aren't these traditional establishment picks that have all these special interest relationships and are ingratiated in the swampy behavior of Washington. That's why Democrats oppose DOJ so much, because their long-running scheme of robbing the American taxpayer and funneling the money back to themselves is over. Now, the last clip I'm going to show you is Tulsi Gabbard exposing that the United States government under Obama funded Al-Qaeda, our sworn enemies, in an attempt to overthrow the Syrian government.
When, as a member of Congress, I learned about President Obama's dual programs that he had begun really to overthrow the regime of Syria, and being willing to, through the CIA's Timber Sycamore program that has now been made public, of working with and arming and equipping Al-Qaeda in an effort to overthrow that regime, starting yet another regime change war in the Middle East. DOD train and equip program, again, begun under President Obama, is widely been known, looked at, and studied, that ultimately resulted in over $500 million being used to train who they called moderate rebels, but were actually fighters working with and aligned with Al-Qaeda's affiliate on the ground in Syria, all to move forward with their regime change and not acknowledging what was obvious at the time and what has unfortunately borne true, which was that a regime change war in Syria, much like the regime change wars in Iraq, the toppling of Gaddafi and Mubarak, while these are all dictators, would likely result in the rise of Islamist extremists like Al-Qaeda taking power.
So that basically summarizes what the entire Democrat strategy has been throughout all of these confirmation hearings. Let's disregard how inept, how incompetent, how much of a failure the last 4 years were, but let's just try to hone in on why this person is unqualified simply because they're aligned to Donald Trump. They complain that these appointments aren't the traditional establishment picks and fail to understand the mandate of the American people. We voted for massive reform to the way government operates so that it actually operates in the interests of the American people. We're tired of a government that puts the interests of the American people last and then was actively weaponized to try to silence and jail the one person who was trying to make that happen for us. But let me know what you guys think down in the comments section below. Whose mic drop moment did you like the best out of those three? If you enjoyed the video, make sure you hit that like button. Make sure you subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Turn on those notification bells so you never miss a video. And I will see you guys in the next one. And thank you for 100K subs.